I haven't completed thorough, thoroughly gotten through Thoreau, and still haven't been thrown out. So thrown out. But we continue with 429 with Thoreau, a life. Ktaadn is still there. That's the mountain. Ktaadn is still there. Unquote. Thoreau had written to Blake once he returned from Maine, just as, quote, the truth is still true. The mountain had haunted him all through the fall of 1857. Late in October he had climbed it in his dreams, wandering lost and thrilled over, quote, the bare and pathless rock of the misty summit being, quote, purified and sublimed. As he later wrote to Blake, quote, you must ascend a mountain to learn your relation to matter, and so to your own body, for it is at home there, though you are not. And it is after you get home that we really go over the mountain, if ever. This is why you have to climb a mountain. Going, quote, over the mountain became his next project. Not to look from the mountain, but to look at it. And for this, the best companion was Blake the philosopher. On June 2nd, 1858, the two met at the Troy train railroad station and hiked the 4 miles to the rocky summit of Mount Monadnock. I was going to climb Mount Monadnock, but I had a dog along, and they said, you can't take the dog. Something happened, I couldn't climb it. Barren of soil, ever since farmers had set fire to the mountaintop to destroy wolf habitat. Goodness. They were destroying the wolves. They were hardly alone. Climbing Monadnock was all the rage. And that very year, a local entrepreneur had opened the Halfway House Hotel on its slopes. Thoreau and Blake picked their way not over a pathless summit, but through a litter of newspapers and eggshells among graffiti-covered rocks. This had become a tourist attraction, I guess. After setting up camp in a sheltered spot, they spent the next day tracing a circle a mile in diameter with 2 transepts over the summit itself. An ecological survey, Thoreau noting everything he could see, the alpine plants and birds, the worn rounded rocks, scratched by glaciers, the wee bogs tucked into the hollows. The frogs, high up in a barren, rocky cistern, baffled him. How had they gotten there? It boggled belief to think they had hopped up. Now,
that's funny.
if Thoreau had trouble getting up the mountain, how did those frogs get up there?
Maybe somebody had it in the bag.
They hopped up. A gossip might say that they had originated on the top, yet it seemed about as likely that they had rained down from the clouds. And how did they survive? Thoreau pondered the puzzle as they walked down the next day to where Right by the railroad stood some of the grandest white pines he had ever seen. Old growth timber that would long since have been logged out of Maine. He stopped to gape at their straight, tall, polished perpendicularity. Do you know what perpendicularity is? Why are these big pines there? Old growth timber. It just hadn't been logged, I guess. Thoreau still had mountains on the mind. A month later, on July 2nd, Ed Orr hired a horse and wagon. Thoreau tossed his knapsack aboard, and the two rattled off, intending to circumnavigate the entire range of the White Mountains. You know where the White Mountains are? They're up in, I guess, New Hampshire and Vermont, and all the way up to Maine. It's along the Appalachian Trail.
They call them white.
The Appalachian Trail. And live like gypsies along the way, meeting Blake and Brown on Mount Washington. That's the end. Mount Washington. Walking, complained Thoreau, would have been better. He didn't like the horse and wagon. He said walking was better. So he complains he doesn't like to take the car, which confined them to good roads, dreary roadside campsites, or trivial inns, pestered by flies and tavern loungers. He didn't like to go as a tourist. 3 days later, mountains came into view, and his mood lifted. In Tamworth, New Hampshire, the innkeeper captivated them with bear stories. The next night they camped near the home of one Wentworth, who told them of killing bears and rearing the orphan cubs at home. He hired Wentworth as their guide up Mount Washington, and next morning, July 7th, they rode through Pinkham Notch to Glen House, where they sent the horses back to Wentworth's and spent the night with two merry Gauliers, busy making coal for the two hotels on the summit. What's these two hotels on the summit?
There were two hotels on the summit also.
Did they already have a hotel on the summit of Mount Washington? While the wind shook the shanty, the 5 men sat up drinking goat's milk and eating boiled beef tongue. You haven't been to Mount Washington, I assume. You can take the train up or drive the car up. Some people have a bumper sticker.
I don't think the mountain would like
on their
somebody
car.
to drive the car up.
It says, I went up to Mount Washington.
Oh, you walk it or you leave it alone?
The mountain?
Unless you can fly with a helicopter and drop down with a parachute on the mountain.
I wouldn't say it's easy to walk up, but it's nothing like climbing Mount Everest. It's an average person can walk up with a little effort.
Everest?
Mount Washington, you can walk up with a little effort in a couple hours. And given the weather's not bad.
What month are they both up there?
Let's read and see. Thoreau was out at first light. You always go out at first light. If you're not professional, you'll lay in your hotel room and get up and have coffee. and go to breakfast
There are north,
and go shopping. You get out and you go 1 o'clock. You say, let's climb the mountain. That's very unprofessional. Very. Thoreau went out at first light, anxious to reach the summit. I always start at the first light because I'm a copycat of Thoreau. He started at the first light at the break of dawn up the mountain. We don't like have breakfast and then go. Ideally, you would have breakfast at the top of the mountain. Thoreau was out at first light, anxious to reach the summit before the clouds rolled in. See, before the clouds rolled in. You also want to go up early so you can see better and get down safely. I like to hike like a professional German hiker. Orr and Wentworth followed behind with the colliers herding their goats. They're on the summit of Mount Washington, the highest peak in New England. You know who, like, you'll find in America, you'll find the most professional hikers in America are usually Germans hiking. And they're on their way down when Americans are on their way up. Thoreau again had no epiphany. The clouds and mist arrived with the man and the goats. They chatted with an artist taking the view, and with Spalding and Hall, the landlords of the summit and tip-top houses which competed for the tourist. There's tourism already. Who arrived by the scores. See, there's already a lot of people arriving. By 8:30 a.m., Thoreau had had enough of summit society. See, that's already by 8:30. Remember, he went at first light, which could be before 6. He led them over the rocks into Tuckermon's ravine, the fog so dense they navigated by compass. See, that's the problem with fog and weather. Actually, the mountain can be dangerous if it's very bad weather. It can get very cold. The ground was so rough they stopped short of their goal and camped amid the dwarf firs, Wentworth ignoring Thoreau's advice. Kindle the fire that the wind whipped into the firs. What? Kindle. Oh, a Kindle. Kindle is a book reader. A Kindle. That way you can kindle my reading of books. Is that where Thoreau kindled the fire? I'm trying to kindle a reading of Thoreau with my Kindle. Soon the whole ridge was on fire. No harm done, said Wentworth. The more trees that burn, the better. As the fire raged up the mountainside, the 3 men waited. They started the mountain on fire. Yeah. Why? It says that they camped amid the firs and they make a fire.
Small fire.
Yeah. Thoreau has a history of starting fires. Raged up the mountainside, the 3 men waded downstream to a small lake where they set up Thoreau's white canvas tent. A faint halloo from above alerted Thoreau that Blake and Brown had arrived, and he scrambled up to meet them, wet, ragged, and bloody with black flies. The other thing is black flies. If you're smart, you have netting. You can have a net. You can have a net all the way around your hat.
If you're smart, you live in the wilderness alone. You don't have to strong within the wind.
No. Now you have a mosquito net. You can wrap it around your hat, tuck it into.
And go and live with mosquitoes.
You have to be.
The mosquitoes are low.
No, it's not mosquitoes. There's black flies. They bite you.
You know that. They don't have to do that.
Why?
I don't think people should climb the mountains. What's for? The mountains should be respected.
He explained that you wouldn't.
Below.
The mountain is your own body. If the earth is
Oh, so you have your body then.
the extension of your body is the earth.
So not all of it.
What's the New Age book I was saying that the microcosm of your whole body is in your foot.
So you are the whole universe.
Your body is in your iris of your eye and in your ear and in your feet. Reflexology.
No, the whole universe is between your eyes.
So we were talking about in ultra modern hiking, you have
climb the mountains with him.
In the year 22nd century, they used molecular machines to keep the black flies out of the way.
So you can easily climb in the astral world.
The molecular black flies that beat off the black flies, so you didn't have to kill the black flies. You just pushed them aside. What happened? What was the environmental impact of?
You kill all the
No,
wild animals to climb.
Yeah, but you don't kill the mosquitoes. You just push them off your body with the molecular machines.
So, but do you know what you causing them?
What?
Do you know the effect you have on them?
When you do that?
Yeah.
Well, they can't.
Because they're too small, you don't care if you disturb them.
Well, disturbing them is different than killing them.
Oh, maybe they are.
No, you just become immune to all of them then. You become immune to all of their bites.
Or you die.
You just die and let them live.
And they eat you after.
We do voluntary death and the animals live. Thoreau noted ruefully that he'd told Blake to look out for smoke in a white tent, and he had made a smoke sure enough. Somehow the 5 men cozied up into Thoreau's tent. There in the soaking rain, it would be their home for 4 nights. Oh, my God. What do they do? Hang out for 4 nights while it rains? Ridiculous. They stink. You're not much of a hiker.
Unless they take a shower in the rain, if they could do that.
It's dirty in the city, and this is not dirty.
5 nights and how many more to get to the mountain?
First of all, the wet water, the rain is clean. The lakes and rivers are clean. And this is summertime, I assume. It's July. They're not exactly cold. Not the original plan, but Thoreau sprained his ankle. The next day, costing him several days walking, he made the best of it, studying all he could hear and reach from camp, then stoking the campfire to keep off the flies, while the others pottered around in the mizzling weather. Finally, on Monday, July 12th, Thoreau's 41st birthday. You're a July guy. He's a you person, like you. They packed up and walked off the mountain, picking up the horse and wagon at Wentworth and jauncing off towards Mount Lafayette, their next goal. They're climbing what they call the presidential range. You know what a presidential range is? The Lafayette isn't a president. Uh, Their necks go arching west, then south, around the base of the range. Heavy rain shuttered the scenery until Tuesday evening, when a short walk from Jefferson Hill brought the whole presidential range into glorious view. The fogs rolling beneath, and the sun glimmering off the peaks. Quote, the grandest mountain view I ever got, exulted Thoreau. He wasn't through with all these mountains. If he hadn't been through them, or had a thorough, or hadn't thrown out anything on the mountain. 2 days later, he stood on the summit of Mount Lafayette, beholding shaggy forest to the south and west, and to the north and east half-cleared woods. The leopards spotted land while they ate dinner. He cut some dwarf spruces and ferns and counted their tree rings. The teeny trees were, Thoreau realized with a shock, hundreds of years old, the largest perhaps over 1,000. How could that be? A tree over 1,000?
Oh, they fought the
Up in that area? Yeah, but I'm thinking sequoia trees, but this is ridiculous. The fire Wentworth sent blazing up Tuckerman's ravine had killed an ancient forest. They killed the forest. Thoreau was a killer. He killed. Do you think it's right to kill? He did. Just said that he started a fire and killed an ancient forest. Thoreau was a killer. The return trip took 4 more nights, heading due south to Plymouth, where Thoreau said farewell to the mountains. Through Franklin and Weary, then over the state line and home by noon. On Monday, July 19th, Thoreau wrote a long, detailed account.
Where does it say that he did the fire?
Here, he just says here, Thoreau wrote a long, detailed account in his journal, suggesting an essay in the making. How do you think she knows this? Because he wrote it in his journal.
But where is about the fire?
Thoreau probably wrote about the fire.
But where are you reading it?
Thoreau wrote it in his journal.
I didn't get anything.
Then read the journal.
What did you say? You say you read it. I don't see anything.
I read it from this book. Who's who I'll say this book is. And this book is Earth Gallery. It's one of the thought to be one of the best biographies written. Highly authoritarian. Okay. Thoreau wrote a long, detailed account in his journal, suggesting an essay in the making, but neither of these 2 mountains excursions took a life beyond the journal. Monadnock had promised, and in 1860 he would return, but the White Mountains would have bust. The wagon trip had not been, quote, simple and adventurous enough. See, when you drive the car, your account of the travel ship is ruined. You're gone by.
It's easier. Anything that's easy.
If it's easy, it's no good. It seemed about on par with Emerson's adventure later that summer to the Adirondacks with the hunting party, where he, Louis Agassiz, and some friends, quote, broke some dozens of ale bottles, one after another, with their bullets. See, if you go with a bunch of drunken friends and they just shoot their beer bottles with their guns, it's very low class. It's like being a hillbilly or a hick or a redneck in the woods. They're like rednecks.
They do it to hide the heat around.
No. Emerson did manage to shoot a Pete wheat wet for Gussie the first game he ever bagged, snorted Thoreau, who had been a crack shot in his youth before he swore off guns. Think of Emerson shooting a Pete wheat for Gussie, cracking an ale bottle after emptying it with his rifle at 6 rods. And wilderness just wasn't what it used to be. Indeed, the whole world was turning into something Thoreau disliked intensely. While she was scouting out huckleberry fields for the annual berry party, he was horrified to find stakes set up with no, quote, no trespassing notices. What would you do if you were in Ohio and were picking berries and it said no trespassing? What do you do? What if you want to eat berries? And, quote, the evil days had come, pickers had to pay for the privilege of gathering wild fruits. Huckleberries were being butchered and sold like beefsteak. You know, there's areas in Africa where they don't have private property. The peoples of Africa didn't have a concept of private property. You could have just huckleberries are just like blueberries. They're like blueberries. It's just another word. Huckle, Huckle. I think they're just blueberries. So now we have to go to the market to buy blueberries. But when on the Smith farm, they had a whole forest of blackberries. Well, maybe parts of it. That's destroy the forest. I know the swamp was dried up where I used to hunt frogs. They dried up the swamp, just like the book said. What about the frogs? We'll have to go check out the forest. But no one cared. All that mattered was the transatlantic telegraph. All they cared about was the internet and using their iPhones. It arrived in Concord on August 5th. And on we can just look at the mountains on. We can just look on Google Photos at the mountains. We don't need to look at them. No.
We don't need to be there.
You don't need to be there. You can just. It arrived in Concord on August 5th and on August 16th when Queen Victoria used it to congratulate President Buchanan. Towns all across America erupted with celebration, and Concord bells pealed merrily, pillars were wreathed, and banners were hung, houses were lit up for block parties. One neighbor even fired off a cannon, and the fireworks was splendid.
Queen, who was it?
Dear Queen Victoria,
The movie we saw, Victoria.
she sends a telegram
She's
transatlantic to President
I
Buchanan.
like Queen Victoria.
We like her. Yeah, I know Queen Victoria. She was good. It was perfectly sublime, inspiring, and an emanation from the deity, unless you were Thoreau. Thoreau was upset. Of course, the telegram was important, he snarled, but what was the real meaning of it? Not how many blasted guns were fired or what each and every little town had done to celebrate. The world was ruled by cliques who filled the news with tissue of trifles and crudités, ignoring what really mattered. So now the news is curated, and you could even get fake news, curation. Now we just believe whatever the TV tells us, like the robots. Things had reached a tipping point, but no one else seemed to notice. It even got personal when someone shot the summer ducks he had befriended. That's horrible.
Someone sucked the summer ducks.
Shot them. Thoreau took it hard. Those ducks had belonged to everyone, to Thoreau just as much as her, but it was considered of more importance that Mrs. Blank should taste the flavor of them dead than that he should enjoy the beauty of them alive. Could you imagine if I shot the ducks off the Smith Pond? They come down.
So something of the duck now, it's in her now. She's a little bit of duck.
Well, who cares about the ducks if we can eat them?
I like the way she wrote it. She has to taste.
Did he write that? Here's the quote. But it was considered more important that Mrs. Blank should taste the flavor of them dead than I should enjoy the beauty of them alive. The ducks can be pretty. Ducks are pretty. Oh, we come back to this whole thing about being a vegetarian. It's my complaint that the animals don't have the right.
I remember them back at the park, Central Park in the lake, had the little ones behind her. It was a mother that, and her little ones were following her, and she had such a proud look. Proud mother.
It's what goes back to what I've been complaining about. The ducks didn't have the right to vote, and the trees don't have the right to vote. Wherever Thoreau looked that summer from village to mountain to river, he saw the commons under assault. Poor Thoreau is under assault. He made one more excursion, for he had not gotten the Cape Cod carpenter's remark that no beach equaled the outer banks of Cape Ann. So he reconvened the, quote, Knights of Umbrella and Bundle. On September 21, Thoreau and Ellery Channing visited John Russell in Salem, who took them botanizing in Marblehead. The next day, the Knights walked from Russell's house to Gloucester. Ever been to Gloucester? Sounding out the musical sands near Manchester.
So there is more Salem. There's another Salem.
There's an area, well, you can go to Salem, And up there's Cape Ann, north of
So,
Boston.
I mean, Boston has 7%. Like, we go to South Salem.
Boston? Salem, Massachusetts, the place where they had the witches.
Oh,
They had the ships and whaling, and they had a big town. It's an early colonial town. The beach indeed squeaked, squeaked, like waxing a table, and shined a shipbread, and airing in a salt marsh while watching the stars come out. Next morning they cut south to the beach and followed it all the way around the Cape in a long day's circle back to Gloucester. Nooning on the outermost point of Cape Ann, facing the rocky reefs of the Selvages, by which reason Thoreau early navigators must have set their course. At sundown they boiled tea over a bayberry fire in a field of big round boulders and watched the moon rise. Quote, she was the biggest boulder of them all. That's the moon. Do you think the moon is the biggest boulder of all? Hmm. Well, it is a big boulder.
What is a boulder?
Big rock. Then got lost in the moonlight on their way back to Gloucester.
That's an interesting way to put it.
Moon's a big rock.
Biggest boulder.
Next day, Thoreau examined the curiosities in Salem's East India Marine Hall. Lynx pelts, fossil turtle, British sword abandoned during the Concord fight. It had been an interesting walk, but
all
no.
The asteroids and the comets, boulders.
What?
All the asteroids, the comets, boulders.
But no more. At least he had reconnected with the elusive Channing, a troublesome creature of moods. It was time to reconnect with Ricketson, too, who was pining for a visit late in November 1858. The peripatetic Commandele wrote out of the blue that he was in Montreal and heading south, planning to winter in the West Indies and hoping Thoreau would come along. On December 7th, Thoreau brought the English gentleman adventurer along for a visit with Ricketson. The three sat up late in the shanty talking of English poetry. Gray, Tennyson, Wordsworth, and for 2 days they alternated walks in the dull, cold drizzle with fireside talks, quote, of mankind and his relationship here and thereafter, unquote, before returning to Concord on December 10th. Later that winter, Cholmondeley indeed headed south, but without Thoreau he made it no farther than Virginia, where he abandoned his plans to travel anywhere ever again, he told Thoreau on his return. Though their correspondence continued, it was their last conversation. Quote, he is a good soul, unquote, Thoreau wrote to Ricketson. Quote, I am afraid that I did not sufficiently recognize him, unquote. Thoreau recorded none of these visits in his journal. There, the hidden interior Thoreau was busy writing the first canto of, quote, Wild Fruits, unquote, and, quote, Autumnal Tints, unquote, his passionate meditation on the creation and perception of beauty in the shared human and natural world. While few could claim material wealth, his spiritual wealth was open to all, quote, equally distributed on the common, unquote, an October festival in which every tree was a liberty pole of 1,000 bright flags. A gala instituted by the town's fathers who had planted those straggling beanpole saplings up and down the streets. A generation later, they had grown up to give the people a festival of beauty, a living institution. Once the leaves had fallen, Thoreau sketched notes for his second essay, quote, November lights, unquote, on the, quote, the 100 silvery lights, unquote, reflected from twigs, from weather-browned leaves, from water and windows. Every season brought its unique phases of beauty. What others overlooked, Thoreau reclaimed, quote, brown is the color for me, unquote, he exulted. The color of our coats in our daily lives, the color of the poor man's loaf, the color of earth, the great leopard mother lying with her flanks to the sun. There he likes brown.
From brown must be burned, come up. Brown is birthday, all the colors.
I see Thoreau as in brown.
I green and blue.
You heard blue?
Green and blue.
Green and blue. What's my color?
Uh-huh.
I thought I was blue.
It's in here. It's in the blue.
Channing complain. I see fall as being brown in a way. The leaves are brown. Channing complained this fall of Thoreau's new pedantry. Quote, a, quote, dry rot. Do you think he's got dry rot? Dry rot. Oh, he's drying up. But in this hidden molten core, Thoreau was fusing and transforming his accumulated years of scientific study into a new kind of instrument, a musical instrument, where every object was a key that struck, resonated across hidden chambers of memory and meaning. He called it his calendar, spelled with a K, but it was far more a symphonic rotation capable of fusing and igniting a lifetime's immersion in a single beloved, deeply known New England village. In his youth, Thoreau had imagined writing, quote, a poem to be called Concord, unquote. Now in his worn green writing desk, that great poem was taking shape. It's grand, huh? The problem was how to be heard when nearly everything he wrote had been rejected, ignored, or censored. While his outer self was professional, dry and workmanlike, in private he was incandescent, phosphorizing in the dark like a stick of Maine foxfire. When he identified a new species of fish in public, he proudly presented it to his scientific colleagues, quote, who duly recognized him while they argued over his taxonomy. But in private he wrote in awe of, quote, those little striped breams posed in Walden's glaucous water. Unseen since Tataha once paddled his canoe on those same waters, Walden was wild again, and America was young again. But how could he get beyond mere description? He must poise his thought, quote, there by its side, and try to think like a bream for a moment. He thought of jewels, music, poetry, beauty, and the mystery of life. Quote, the mean thus appreciated floats in the pond as the center of the system, another image of God. He must convey what mattered most, the bream as, quote, a living, contemporary, a provoking mystery. Thus, when Lowell deleted his attribution of souls to trees, Thoreau felt it as nothing less than an existential threat. Quote, freedom of speech, unquote, he howled in his journal. It hath not entered into your hearts to conceive what those words mean. The alleged freedom of church, state, school, magazine was, quote, the freedom of a prison yard. Look at the popular magazines, quote, I have dwelt in 2 or 3, the most liberal of them. They are afraid to print a whole sentence, a round sentence, a free-spoken sentence. Amid the panic of 1857, the graffiti and the litter, the hotels erected on sacred mountaintops, laughter that mocked poets, and Magudas, not trespassing, signs on the town's ancient commons, newspapers trivializing the most historical events. How could Thoreau communicate His urgent call to true freedom. Wow. Might know the answer. Let's stop him there on page 436. Seems there's trouble in paradise after all.
Why?
Because of the things, pollution, because of
They started to pollute.
civilization. Civilization has messed up everything. I don't know. What were we reading? So,
That's what you're reading. Why do you leave the window open?
are we through with
Freezing.
Thoreau, or when are we going to be through? We're on page 436. Actually, dear, it ends at 500. We'll be ending at 500.